This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed. We were just here to sort of give you the stuff that's probably been in the news the most and that you would have seen across the week. And that really was the social media ban legislation.
Yep. Absolutely. So world's first legislation. Labor and the Coalition backed that bill, and essentially its purpose is to make the social media platforms, so we're talking about TikTok, Facebook, Snapchat, Reddit, X, Instagram, they would be liable for fines of up to $50 million in Australian dollars if they failed to prevent young people from signing up to accounts.
So under 16, 16's the age, as we know. How it works and will work is still in question, though. The platforms have a year to work out how to implement the age restriction before those penalties that you talked about are enforced. One thing they won't be allowed to do is compel users to provide government-issued identity. So you won't have to have a ID card that you then submit.
Yeah, like a copy of your passport or your driver's license or something like that.
I'm thinking about 16, what would they have? Like a student card?
Yeah, some sort of ID.
Yeah.
Well, clearly they won't have one.
They won't need it.
Which is kind
not
of the point.
Yeah.
So it goes to concerns, that bit around privacy. Early in the week, there was a small group of coalition MPs and senators who raised their concerns. They were particularly worried. They just weren't comfortable with the idea that Australians would have to hand over that sort of documentation to these social media platforms. And essentially not just young people either, all of us.
We'd all have to prove that we're not under the age of 16.
Yeah, exactly. The idea is that anyone in Australia would have to verify their age. We don't really know how it's all going to work. As you said, the details are still TBC.
Privacy isn't the only concern. Other criticisms include that the legislation has been rushed through the parliament without adequate scrutiny, that it just won't work as well. How is this actually going to work? And that kids are just going to find their way around these verification processes anyway.
Yep, something that Bryce Corbett talked about when it came to a radio interview he did with Ben Fordham this week. There's certainly a lot of conversation about kids just being savvy enough to get around whatever they do put up. Another one of these concerns that popped up is that it would take away the rights of parents to decide what's best for their children. That was from the more right-leaning coalition senators. They also raised these general concerns around censorship and whether it's appropriate for the government to censor any media for anyone in Australia.
For those that lean that way in politics, anything that says ban is an automatic.
It's a red flag.
It's an automatic red flag. Where my head goes with all of this is what, and you kind of touched on it, but what constitutes a social media platform? I think we across the news this week, it's just social media platforms. But what are we actually referring to here? Some of the ones you mentioned, and so I looked into this.
Yep.
Some of the ones you mentioned, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, X, Reddit, are platforms that the government's mentioned will definitely be covered under this legislation. The definition in the legislation is that a social network is defined as any online service that has a significant purpose of enabling online social interactions between two or more users. It's about that exchange between people, that social element. The laws, though, will give the Minister for Communications, who is currently Michelle Rowland, the right to rule platforms in or out. So, for example, she's already said this week, YouTube won't be included as part of these bans.
Yeah, plenty say it's very murky and could be quite arbitrary. So Bryce Corbett, again, he made the point on radio that there are so many apps that adults haven't heard of.
He listed some and I can't even remember them.
Whisper.
Never heard of it.
Twitch is one. I've definitely heard of Twitch. Essentially, these are a lot of the platforms around gaming and interactive gaming. They're big platforms where kids do communicate, and there are all sorts of things that can happen on those sites as well.
In case you have no idea who Bryce Corbett is, he's the director of Squiz Kids. We've talked about him a bit, but you know what? You might
Everyone knows Bryce, surely.
Bryce Corbett.
Just assume that.
Zoe Daniels, who's a TLMP from Melbourne, said the true object of this legislation, and this is her quote, is not to make social media safe by design, but to make parents and voters feel like the government is doing something about it.
Yeah, the good old someone's done something, so we've ticked that box and move on. That's certainly Zoe Daniels' view. You couldn't say that she's from the right. She's a very prominent former ABC journalist, so she's just got a very different view about all of this. She really wants to see something that will work. Also, of course, when it comes to parents and what they will want, you can't blame them for wanting something.
It's interesting. For every critic, there's a parent out there going, "Oh, great!
Yeah.
I get to tell my kids you're not allowed."
Yeah, the police might come and find you.
That seems nice. And as a parent myself, I'm like, well, that sounds like, it's actually illegal. That sounds like an easy way out. But also, I mean, the issue around banning something and how to actually go about that. Well, this is going to play out across the coming year.